Welcome back, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with the lunch panel. All right, how about this morning? How was everybody's breakout? Yeah? And what about Governor Pillen? That was incredible to have him here and hear his story. So in the panel, just fantastic. So really excited to kick off this afternoon. And I do know Faith mentioned this morning that Tabitha Rosproy is not able to join us. She sends her regrets and has promised us that she will be here next year. So we're excited about that and wish her well. A good thing about that is that we have more time to hear from 4 incredible community members that are doing the work, boots on the ground here in Nebraska. So I am really excited about having them join me on the stage. Today's lunch panel is really all about partnerships, and I don't have to tell anybody in this room that none of us can do this alone. This is all about working with people in our communities, in our state, to make things happen. So one thing I do want to mention around partnerships, and I'm going to have to correct Dr. Gilliam from this morning's slide, when we talked about there are 11 counties in Nebraska with no licensed childcare. As of last Monday, thank you to partnerships with Department of Health and Human Services, Nebraska Department of Education, Nebraska Children and Families Foundation, Loup County opened their first licensed childcare. Yeah, it's exciting. And this is in partnership with their public school, where the child care is housed, with alumni from the public or from the school, as well as with their local community foundation. So this is really exciting to be able to be part of that. So Walter, change your slide. We are now at 10 unlicensed counties in Nebraska. So fantastic. I am thrilled to welcome 4 incredible people to the stage to join me today. So if you guys want to make your way up as I introduce you. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, the first is Jarod Albers. Jarod is the superintendent of Cambridge Public Schools and the president of the Cambridge Community Daycare Foundation. I want to emphasize he is a superintendent of schools as well as president of the local Child Care Foundation. 2 roles that this guy is playing. Jarod has spent more than 18 years as an educator in rural Nebraska, and he knows firsthand the challenges that small communities face. So thank you, Jarod, for joining us today. Tammy Day is a business owner of Daycos in Norfolk, Nebraska. She is an owner, a mentor, a public speaker, a writer, and a trainer. She is also the chair of the Norfolk Child Care Cooperative Steering Committee. Large business owner, chair of the Child Care Committee. Anybody seeing a theme that we have going on in these communities? She has a deep commitment to help businesses succeed by balancing profit and purpose. Okay. I told you these guys are awesome. All right, Maricela. Maricela Novoa is the Early Learning Connection bilingual specialist with ESU, Educational Service Unit 10. She previously served as a home visitor and actively promotes equitable opportunities for all children, working with diverse communities and providing Spanish training to educators and parents. This woman is the reason that we are seeing a huge system change with our Spanish-speaking providers in Nebraska. So welcome, Maricela. I think maybe she didn't need an introduction. All right. Colten Venteicher, although he's not wearing a tie, sure, Venteicher, is an attorney, and he is an active force behind Gothenburg's Impact Center. He plays leadership roles in the community's housing, business recruitment efforts, and he understands the incredible way in which both business and community housing are directly related to early childhood. He's also famous for cross-country, and you'll see his name on a lot of committees. Colten is standing up for our state around early care and education. So welcome, all of you, to the stage. All right, friends, so we're going to get started with one question for all of you. And when I first asked this question, I got from Jarod, does it really have to be one word? So we're going with, if you were to give me one-ish words about the importance of partnership when it comes to quality early care and education, what would that be? So we'll start with you, Jarod.
Well, with the 1 week that you gave us to come up with the word,
Yeah, you're welcome.
the most profound thing I could come up with was necessity. They are a necessity thing that we have to have in order to be successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Tammy.
I'm hyphenating my word. It's the Nebraska way. This is how we get business done here.
Fantastic. Good. Maricela.
I would have to say innovation.
Great. And Colten.
Generational.
Nice. Good. Very good. You guys all did really well with the one-ish. Good
work.
Thank you.
Broke the ice.
All right. So, Jarod, we're going to start with you. So, Cambridge Public Schools has brought partnerships to life by not opening just one, but 2 family home to programs within the school, as well as in a local business. First of all, talk about how that came about, and then in particular, talk about the partnerships that have played a role, and third, if you can remember it all, how this changed the culture in your school.
Well, I mean, how that all came about was, to be honest with you, like if anybody knows me at all, like I kind of like challenges, and I'm kind of determined to kind of see them through to the end. So we have a local community investment club that I'm a part of that generates funds to put towards different projects in the community, and one of the people looked at me knowing that I work at school, and at the time I was the principal, and they looked at me directly and said, the school needs to solve the daycare problem in our community. So I got with a local gentleman who is an attorney within our community. He's since left our community and is now a district court judge in Hastings, so he was pretty good to have on our team.
Yes.
And then a gal that's a local businesswoman in our community that we all kind of had the same sort of vision of trying to do things that were going to help grow our community. None of us three, the little backstory, none of us three ever had one of our children actually attend the daycares, so it was something that was outside. It was more of a purpose and a passion thing rather than a necessity for us.
Absolutely.
But it was a necessity for our community. In terms of the school, we beat every drum in our community to try to figure out where we could land to get our program started. We just went to businesses, we went to churches, and even though everybody was really willing to help, there wasn't anybody that had space available. So I pulled some strings and was able to get us into the school with one room, and the program kind of flourished from there. You were going to have to remind me of the third question.
And the third one is, how has it changed the culture of your school?
Well, I think it's been a great thing, because I think it's some of our educators, which are great people. Not everybody. I feel like the number one thing that we fight against every day are the people that need daycare and the people that do not need childcare.
Right.
So we had people within our own school building that did not need childcare, that they themselves stayed home to raise their children, or their spouse stayed home, and they didn't need to see the necessity of that. How over the course of time, they've got to see just how important this has not only been for the school, the kids, but also our community and the future growth of our community.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Jarod, very much. Maricela. All right. So you bring a unique perspective to our panel's conversation around partnership. Not only has your work helped to elevate childcare within the communities, but you're also focusing on partnerships to ensure providers whose preferred language isn't English have equitable access to resource. Can you provide a couple examples about how you're building these partnerships?
Yes, most definitely. I think building those relationships and that trust has played a big part of the work that I'm doing now. And I also think that building those relationships with everybody that supports us, I think that empowerment piece also, looking at the providers from a strength-based perspective and really seeing their qualities. Because at the end of the day, when you build a relationship or you sit down and have a conversation with somebody, you look past of the differences, but you really can see and share values. And also with those partnerships of organizations, you're sharing that same missions with everybody. So when we look past the differences, I think we have a lot in common at the end of the day of where we want our kids to be in the different cultures. And it's the same thing, we want them to thrive. And that doesn't happen if we don't sit down and listen to their stories and listen and have a conversation. And I think all the amazing supporters that really put their heart into it have listened to those stories. And they And that makes a difference in those building that relationship. And we're just hardwired to do that. So
Yes, fantastic. Thank you. Colten, we're going to talk about the Gothenburg Impact Center. It is a phenomenal story and been so much fun to watch what's happening in Gothenburg. So this will be an integrated facility to provide quality care and education for more than 250 local and regional children, but it also is going to provide a lot of other things, family services, athletic, event. How did you use partnerships to impact this vision for the Impact Center?
Sure. So the Impact Center and the different components that are included within it, really the concept was born out of the reality that a lot of our child care facilities face right now, and that is our child care funding model is broken, right? We can't charge folks enough to pay the people that we need to really for that cost of care. And by the way, that's only going to get worse. We know that we're on the tail end of a $300+ million distribution of funds throughout the state towards early childhood education. At the same time, over the next 3 years, we're going to see minimum wage increase by over 40%. How are we going to absorb that? That's going to get passed on to our parents. So we heard a lot from politicians and folks this morning understanding that this is an issue, but really in my mind, the biggest piece that we need to advocate for is we've got to prepare for that coming cliff. So, but we recognize that piece, and ultimately we backed into the partnership solutions-based model. We identified what we wanted to pay our folks. So with the Impact Center facility, we'll pay people $15 to $17 an hour, plus a discounted rate for childcare for their own children. And we knew that would give us a shortfall, right? A couple $100,000 shortfall. But then we started having conversations with different potential partners throughout the community and said, okay, we're going to solve these problems for this community. Can you help be a part of that solution? So we went to the school. They operated a 15-child public preschool program. It cost them about $175,000 a year to operate. Well, we said we can be much more efficient with that same amount of money. And so we got them on as partners. They've signed on to an interlocal agreement to provide that operational support year over year. But we still weren't quite there. And so we had conversations with the city and with the hospital. And consistently we heard, well, if we're going to be putting funds into this community facility, we see, in addition to the child care piece, something else that could help us, particularly with the city. It was an event center. We don't have a place where we can have large events in town. And so we looked at it and said, well, we're going to have a facility that's already operating 6 to 6 every day. We'll have the staff, we'll have the infrastructure. If we can get the facility up, we can help you run it. Just pay us a little bit for it. And so we have the city putting in $100,000 a year to help out with that operational shortfall. And then looked at the hospital and said, okay, we need to find a way to bring you guys into this. And what they're going to do is provide child care as an employer-provided benefit to all of their employees. So we got all of those folks to come together because of the vast expanse of this 40,000 square foot facility to ultimately provide that sustainable solution.
That's great. That is fantastic. I remember, gosh, could it have been 5 years ago? At a community visioning center in Gothenburg, and people were throwing these things out. And I remember at the time it was like, no, we got to focus on one thing. So it's amazing where you are today. So thank you for sharing. Tammy, Norfolk has turned to an innovative idea, childcare cooperative. Tell us more about the concept. What gave you the idea to get this started? And then did you see examples somewhere, or really how did you come up with this?
Yeah, thank you. So my husband and I own a small business in Norfolk called Daycos, and we are always trying to figure out how do we do good in our community and for our employees. So we originally started looking at this childcare issue as an employee issue, and it became apparent that it was much larger than that, and that if we opened a center at Daycos, that's nice, but Norfolk is short about 600 slots in our community. And so how do we figure out how to create something that could be replicated across the community to have a larger impact? So that was what I set out to do. Last year I was here gathering information from all of you, and it became apparent that there are a lot of great solutions happening, especially in towns like Gothenburg, where you can build one center and that really gets at your capacity number. But in a mid-sized community like Norfolk, it's not enough. So we had to think through what would make a difference. So we set out to create a high-quality childcare solution that was business-driven, because businesses had not been at the table. And now I think good news, bad news, here we are. But it's time to bring in some people who may be able to drive some different solutioning. So what we're building is a childcare cooperative, like a farmer's co-op or a grocery store, right? And the businesses in our community are actually the co-op members. Those businesses are committed to covering the operational funding for that center to create a sustainable model long-term. And then in return, they have a benefit to offer their employees. So they will be able to guarantee early childhood care and learning if you come and work for that company. In return, then the businesses can also decide how much to subsidize that care for their employee benefit. So each business can tailor that to what their workforce needs are and what's affordable for them, and how desperate are they to recruit and retain employees. So that's the model we're working on. It has not been done in Nebraska before. There are some models that are similar but not the same. We have 8 different companies working together. There's a model in North Dakota that's done by our rural electric company. And then we've got some friends in California who have parent-led co-ops. So that's what we're trying to build and hopefully test out in the world. So.
Yeah, it's exciting. That's another model that, as Tammy said, it's new in Nebraska. This is something that we haven't seen a lot of, but I think it is something that really could work, again, around partnership. Yeah. It is critical. So next question for all of you, all right? When it comes to partnerships, identifying and engaging active and committed groups, organizations, and people, no surprise, sometimes this is difficult. How do you counteract responses or naysayers who suggest that partnerships sometimes are too hard or I don't really care about childcare? So, Jarod.
Well, I mean, like I said about myself, I'm a very determined person, so I think that's probably the number one key thing is to be determined and understand that this is a process and a long haul, and just to kind of stick with what your belief system is and what you're trying to accomplish, and eventually those naysayers are going to join you on your side of the fence.
They just don't know their championship. Yep, absolutely. Great. How about you, Tammy?
I mean, if anyone knows me, I'm a little bit of a disruptor anyway, so I probably didn't pay attention to a lot of that. But I think, when I started into this space, like I'm a business owner, I'm not an early childhood expert. I don't want to be, quite frankly. But, it looked like there was space for something new. And so you get a lot of, well, that's going to do this, and well, that's not going to work. But the absence of trying something like this is that nothing changes. And so I think it's just trying to push forward, be innovative, and it's not all going to work out perfectly, right? But I think we have to do something. As Walter mentioned this morning, we can't just sit and admire this problem anymore. We all know what the problem is. It's time to start trying things and seeing what works. So.
Absolutely. Yes, love that. Maricela.
Knock on a different door. We did door knocking and bringing people in, and if it doesn't work, just go forward, move forward. And I think find your the people that really empower you and support you, and also seeing that whole prevention. Like it's just, it blows me away where I went to social work and thinking about the intervention, and it took me less than a year to figure out that this model's not working and it's not gonna work. And so this is when I went into early childhood as a home visitor, and when I realized, I'm like, why not? Like, why not? Like, why not put all this money towards prevention with all these problems that we have now? So just finding the correct people, knocking on different doors, and moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yes, thank you. Colten.
I'm going to say, kind of building off of Maricela, surround yourself with a great support system. I'm very lucky, somebody who could be sitting right next to me up here is my wife, Tabitha, because for the last 5-6 years, as I've been rolling my sleeves up, diving into this, she's been that support system. And you need that, because when you're dealing with naysayers, you get knocked down. And so having that support system is very important, but really having the willingness to roll your sleeves up, sit down and have the conversation. So figuring out specifically, okay, why do you see this not working? Let's work through the actual scenarios, breaking that down from a problem-solving oriented position helped us not only bring some of those people on board, but it also helped us as we were preparing to answer some of those more difficult questions. It helped us identify some of those things that maybe we hadn't seen initially.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I do need to note that his strongest support system also is a former preschool teacher, so that doesn't help that she gets it. That's a great thing. So Tammy, everybody here, I believe, understands the value of partnership when it comes to supporting children and families. What is the business case for partnership?
Yeah, well, I think it's a strong business case, especially in this labor market. You heard even this morning, we don't have enough people, right? So finally, I think businesses are paying attention in a way that maybe they weren't before, and they were hoping someone else would solve their problem, right? I appreciated hearing about the survey data again, where 31% of Nebraskans said they are not working due to childcare issues. And in my county, Madison County alone, that's 550 people. Wow. And I tell you, as an employer, I would love to have 550 more people in our labor pool.
Yes.
So I think there's just that, right? But also, when you tell the story about the importance of early childhood education and care, the long-term impacts of not doing that, you have businesses who are desperate to hire and retain people, and they cannot. And then you start to talk to those people in your community that you know are willing to kind of do things differently, right? You know who those people are. And luckily in Nebraska, we have businesses with really deep roots in our communities, and they care very much about the future of their place. And so I think leaning into those kinds of conversations, that's where we started. And, we have 8 companies now, and that's kind of on purpose. We don't want to have a lot more because we want the true innovators who are willing to sort of take this thing and figure out how to make it work. But then as we scale, there's room at the table for more people. So I think it's just talking about the case for business. We all want to be able to recruit and retain employees. We want to have attractive benefits. Most business owners are not early childhood experts. They don't want to be. So a solution that allows them to not have to run their own center or figure out how to do things like that, I think is really critical. And just coming to the table with some ideas ahead of time, I think makes the conversation easier.
Great, thank you. Maricela, tell us about some unexpected successes your community has experienced as a result of the work that you're doing around partnership.
So just a few examples is that providers or these Spanish-speaking providers are just asking for more training, more support, and it's hard because we don't have enough trainers in Spanish to do this work. So, but they're just ready for more. They're just hungry for knowledge, and they're taking it, they're soaking it in, and it's just amazing to see that, because that just brings just bilingualism into our community. And if we know that from a early childhood standpoint, that just means children that have better cognitive skills, problem-solving skills, if they can get into a center or home care that is teaching them Spanish and is teaching them a second language. So again, looking at the strength-based perspective of it, of what does this mean for us if we're educating our Spanish-speaking providers? We're giving them a tool. We're giving children tools to be more successful in life.
Absolutely. So a couple solutions to think about. Either you work 160 hours a week to do those trainings that are requested, or I think maybe you're on this call, Maricela, but in the last couple of weeks, we have a statewide call, about 50 of us on the call, and it was brought up about what is available in other languages, and state leaders across the state piped in with, we've got this and we've got this, and there's a movement. There's some changes happening, so it's really incredible.
It's very exciting, but I think it has to be, it's again a partnership. Absolutely. I think it's definitely a testament to all those people that have invested and believed in supporting this Spanish population, and I think it's just a trickle effect that it's gonna get the snowball rolling, and it's just, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is a great fun thing to see. So Jarod, as a superintendent, you're keenly aware of the importance between the strong partnership between family and schools. So tell us some ideas you have that schools can really open the door to welcome parents before their kids start to attend school with you.
Well, I would say, from our standpoint, I would to clarify something with our program is we are leasing space from the school.
Right.
So the school being a partner for us, I think is critical, as you talked about earlier with culture.
Yeah.
To just have maybe a deeper conversation about where the state of education is in our not only our state but our country. If you turn on the TV, you're often hearing about the bad things that are happening with public schools, and I think this has been a great opportunity to allow people and families to jump into the school system earlier and get to see, boy, the school system opened its arms in my time of need.
Yeah.
I want to be there and support them and be a champion for them as well. And I think that's something that we've really gained from this. Another way that we've been able to foster that too is our early childhood educator in our building is one of our current board members. And we've really adapted our model within our daycare program to be more of a, preschool. Our kids that are coming into our preschool at 6 weeks, our daycare at 6 weeks, are learning skills that are going to make them more successful learners when they get into the building. So I think we've really tried to stretch out the learning. They now have easier access to programs for students that have special needs that we can help foster that growth a little bit earlier in the process. So it's been a great thing to invite that into our building and to help grow and facilitate that type of stuff that's happening in our community.
Yeah, that's just incredible. I know before when we were having lunch, just talking about too how your school personnel have embraced this as well. That the fact that your cook, when you said 12 more children next year, and she was like, great.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. I mean, it really is. That's a huge win.
Yeah, because you were saying in your situation, maybe that's
the
not
cook was like, I have to feed how many more kids? So,
right. So it takes, I know it's a cliche, but it really takes a village to make this all work. And
absolutely.
And if we're gonna grow the community of Cambridge, it takes everybody on board to make it happen.
Absolutely.
So.
Great. Thank you. All right, Colten. I'm going to ask you to lean into the interlocal agreement a little bit and talk about how did you build the partnerships to even get to that ask, and who did you need to have around the table?
Sure. So I get to nerd out about being a lawyer here for a second. So the interlocal agency is a product of state statute. So what it says is we can take different public entities, 2 or more public entities, bring them together and form a new public entity or a state agency. So initially what we did was we had approached our city and school and hospital and said, hey, we have a need for a full-time position. And that's our early childhood community coordinator position, which Nicole Hetz serves as. But we needed some funding to do it. The city can't just write a check to a nonprofit, right? But through this interlocal agency, we can take away some of those barriers and open up the ability to fund that. So for the last 4 or 5 years, we've funded that position. And then as we started having this conversation on this community facility, we saw a lot of benefits with that structure as well. So our interlocal agency, the Gothenburg Impact Center's facilities agency, my staff hates writing all of that out and everything, was formed, and really it's a partnership between the city and the school. Initially, we approached it because we wanted to, again, provide an avenue for them to flow that capital into this facility, whether it was for capital construction costs or for the operations. But we also saw some additional benefits. So it's a tax-exempt entity, a sales tax-exempt entity. So with this agency being the owner of the facility, we're saving about $700,000 plus on sales tax alone by using this entity. So it's given us a lot more flexibility and opened the doors to some funding opportunities that wouldn't have been there. So how do we get, really, whether it's through interlocal agency or the city, the school, hospital, involved with something like this? Again, it goes back to we had to roll up our sleeves and have the conversations time and time again. We have a city council member here, Verlin, and he'll know who I'm talking about, but there was a particular city council member. I probably met with him 30 plus hours over the course of about a year. One time was a 4-hour meeting. He started and he was a no. It was, I'm not going to, I don't think that the city should support what is primarily an early childhood piece. But again, sat down, heard his concerns, really talked through why this was a solution that would work for the community, why it was the best solution. And ultimately, when it came down to signing off on that interlocal agreement, I went into that meeting thinking he was still going to be a no, and he voted yes. When it comes to getting those people on board, you just have to put the time in. It makes it very difficult, and I understand we all don't have that time, but that's when it comes down to not just admiring the problem, actually finding the solution, that's really what it takes.
Fantastic, yeah. And it is that approach of never hear a no, always hear a maybe, or maybe later. So just keeping that in mind. So thanks for sharing that, Colten. Tammy, so you've had success with one of the truly almost most difficult partnership arenas out there. Partnerships consensus among 8 different businesses in your community. How did you get them to set aside the spirit of competitiveness to come together around this childhood conversation?
Yeah, I think some of the things I mentioned earlier about the labor pool at the moment sets a good tone, right? And then I also think it's just, again, as Colten said, putting in the time, trying to have conversations about impact. We did have employers say to us, oh, we've asked our employees, we don't have an issue with early childhood care and education. And I said, oh, okay. And I think you have to be okay with that too, right? We know that that's a little short-sighted because of course your current employees may not obviously have issues because they are working for you, right? They have a solution. But no parent wants to admit they'd like a different solution, right? They'd really like a better place for their kids to go. And I think we're missing out on that potential employee pool when we think that way. But I think you just have to go into those conversations, talk about your ideas, tell the story, and then see who's interested. I like the cooperative model because it's based on collective decision making, which is actually why it makes it so sustainable. I see our friends at the Nebraska Community Foundation here, and they talk about things that people create together actually have greater ownership, right? I mean, you've probably heard the phrase, nobody ever washes a rental car, because if you don't own something, you don't take care of it, right? And so collective decision making will be a key piece of how this childcare model gets built out and tested. And I think it was finding those people who wanted that co-creation opportunity. They just needed to be invited to the table and helped to see a possible path forward. So we're talking high-level decision makers are the people that you want to engage with because you've got to have people who can see that bigger picture and have the power to say yes or no. And just getting those folks to the table, I think, is really critical.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So we have time for one more question. So I'm going to do one and ask each of you to answer. So we're going to wrap up with asking you to give some practical advice or tangible items that our audience can take home with them. So share one tip with the attendees today that can help them create partnerships that help children, families, and communities thrive. So we'll go opposite with Colten starting this time.
Yeah, for me, it's really sit down and have the conversations, whether it's those naysayers, whether it's those existing providers that are already in this realm, they need to be a part of that conversation when it comes to finding out that solution. But ultimately, all of that comes down to the fact that the solution is not going to present itself tomorrow or next year. This is a process. But if we're going to find a long-term sustainable solution to the particular issue in your community, it's better to take a few years to find that than to put a Band-Aid on it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Maricela?
I think involving the community, and depending on what community you're in, but really inviting them, providing or eliminating barriers.
Yeah.
So like childcare, providing food. Food brings people together, have those conversations, and just really build that relationship and hear what they need to, because they have concerns, and bringing the community together and really listening to what they have to say, and then build up on that. And again, eliminating the barriers is huge. We've seen that if a lot of these providers wouldn't be able to attend the certain cohorts because they didn't have childcare for themselves, or that's the time that they prepare a meal for the family. So having food and childcare, and then they just come and focus on learning, has worked a lot for us. And then that just builds that relationship of we do care for them.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Tammy.
Yeah, I think there's a few key pieces. It sounds cliche, but it's really relationship building. It's leveraging the relationships in your community and making those connections. Casey Baylitz mentioned it earlier. What assets exist in your community, and how can you start to connect some of those dots? And then I think it's also figuring out, I think in Nebraska, we all value that idea of local control. And trying to figure out locally as a community, what are the solutions that make the most sense here? And it won't be one solution, right? You're gonna have to try it and hit that problem from multiple angles, but I think it's trying to figure out, Nebraska, we kind of have to figure things out on our own sometimes. And so take that spirit and really try to lean into that idea.
Absolutely. Great. And Jarod.
Well, I feel like I'm fortunate to be sitting in a room full of leaders in their communities and leaders in their region. The one thing I would say is have some foresight into, what your area or what your community really needs, and try to get ahead of the problem. Colten, I've had a chance to listen to, the story, but if you had a chance to listen to a story, this is a multi-year process. So this isn't something that you can take home tomorrow and be like, hey, we're going to start this process and we're going to have something open in 3 months. Because there's a lot of hurdles that come between now and then. So have the foresight to see what needs to be done in your community now so that you can be prepared for what's coming 3, 4, 5 years down the line.
Yes, absolutely. Just such good advice. Trust the process, take your time. You're right. There are communities that 10 years plus, but they're getting it right. Listen. Provide food, can't emphasize that enough. Relationships, Tammy, that is critical we kind of joke about somebody may not know they're a champion yet, but it's building those relationships and helping people, those naysayers, understand why this is so critical. And then again, foresight, knowing what's ahead, really understanding and knowing your community. One of the things we talk about a lot is once you've seen one community, you've seen just that. And you're right, in Nebraska, Tammy mentioned this, but we have to be innovative because we all know what's best for our community, and sometimes it's up to us to find that solution. And you are all doing that. It's just incredible to work with you. I am honored to have the conversation with you today. And I do hope that all of you, 550 of you, find these people and learn more, dig into their stories, and find out how this can impact your local communities. They've got great things to share. So thank you. Let's give our panel a hand.